Welcome to a hospice workshop, Understanding the Ramifications of Euthanasia. I am Chaplain Billy Norris, and I work with Amorim Hospice. And every once in a while, we have patients and their families that want to discuss euthanasia. And for those of you that don't understand that word, euthanasia, it's simply taking their life, suicide. We have several here today that may have experienced somebody that has taken their life, has wanted to end their life because of certain circumstances. A lot of the hospice patients that we have now have at least thought about it once or twice. And with cancer on the rise, and most of the cancers that we experience today are more painful, they are more brutal in terms of suffering, and we at least have that conversation with just about every patient that we have. With a lot of the patients that we have today, they have different types of cancers, they have Alzheimer's, they have dementia. We are increasingly seeing diseases like ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, where it affects the body instead of the mind. They know exactly what's going on, but most of the time they can't do anything about it. And euthanasia or suicide, and in North Carolina, I'll go ahead and tell you this, in North Carolina, patient or family-assisted suicide is against the law. We don't do that in hospice. As a matter of fact, as you will see here this morning, that we have a primary goal of hospice is that we provide care and comfort to the patient at any and all cost. We try to make sure that the patient is cared for, that they have no pain, they don't suffer. We do not kill anyone. Hospice has always been a source of people saying we bring them in and we kill them. We don't do that. We help them transition from this life to the next. And we will see that with all of these diseases that are coming along, more and more people are thinking about ending their life early. And while hospice's main goal is to care for those folks and to give them the care and the comfort that they desire, we do have that responsibility to give them every option that they might have. As you see here, more than 2/3 of cancer patients will experience extreme pain. We've all known somebody in our life, if not personally, in our own families, that have had that extreme pain, that suffering. We know of one recently where she had brain cancer, and she suffered, I'm not sure if she had pain exactly, but she was suffering from delusions. She was suffering from just being uncomfortable. Bone, brain, and pancreatic cancer are the leading types of cancer that causes pain. We know that with all the cancers, they are on the rise, and it seems to be like bone and pancreatic and brain cancer are the most talked about, the most visible types of cancer. We try to treat these as much as possible and to secure their pain and their suffering. But at times, even though we provide the medications, even though we provide everything that we can to alleviate that pain, the thought of extreme pain, as we all know, is enough to at least keep that suicidal thought at the forefront of our minds. And most of us here today will recognize that suicide is something that we don't like to talk about. we don't like to think about. We know, I'm sure all of us know somebody that has taken their life, and it has repercussions, ramifications, if you will. It's a cause and effect. And we need to talk about this, especially with hospice patients and their families, to get everything out on the table as soon as we can. People 75 and older have the highest rate of suicide in America. And you'd think that it would just be the opposite. We hear of young people taking their lives each and every day. But it is actually older people that have the highest rate of suicide. And most of that is increased when someone is diagnosed with a terminal illness. It doesn't have to be cancer. It can be Alzheimer's, it can be dementia, it can be ALS, as we mentioned before. But when somebody is thinking about their pain and their suffering, even about their families, they don't want their families to have to take care of them. We've all heard of that and all thought of that. But euthanasia, or assisted suicide, if you will, is increased 4 times with male patients. Most men, older men, don't like the idea of having somebody to come in and care for them. The thought of having their children or grandchildren to care for them, or even a nurse or a certified nursing assistant, CNA, to come in and care for them is just uncomfortable for them. And we see that with male hospice patients, their suicidal rates or euthanasia rates are 4 times higher. Euthanasia is twice as predictable in Caucasian males or white males with stage 4 cancer. They just don't want to have to hear or deal with that as their end of life. Most of us will admit we all want to go fast and quick and easy, right? But with cancer patients, most of the time they linger, and this is where the thoughts of suicide or assisted suicide come into play. Again, in North Carolina, this is against the law, but we do have a large number of hospice patients asking about the possibility of ending their lives early. 75% of all patients who choose to end their life will have family members who will later start thinking about suicidal thoughts themselves. Taking your life doesn't always end with just taking your life. It always has repercussions with other family members thinking about the same thing themselves. 35% of those same family members will attempt suicide at least once. And anytime anybody says anything about suicide or having thoughts about ending their life, we ought to take it seriously. Especially with hospice patients, because they really have nothing to lose. They think that their time has come, and in most cases it has. With hospice patients, they have to be diagnosed with less than 6 months to live. That's how we make the determination to bring them into hospice. Euthanasia or suicide does not end with a person choosing that option. We have to remember that those that are left behind will look back on this event and think, what if I'm placed with the same situation? Or what if my life brings about different trials and troubles? What will I do? I will tell you about 3 examples, and I've got permission from all these families to tell us about these examples. But the first example I want to use is an older man. He had been alienated by his family, and he remembers his father as being a good man, but his father ended his life with bone cancer. And this man I'm going to tell you about today has been diagnosed with bone cancer himself. And he saw his father dying, he saw his father suffering. Back when his father passed, there wasn't any such thing as hospice in this area. So he saw his father being in incredible pain. And he told me, he says, I don't want to go through an horrendous pain like this. I don't want to go through what my father experienced. And he went on and on and on, and he kept talking to me about ending his life himself. He says, I've got a pistol in the drawer. He says, I'm not afraid to use it. He said, I know where I'm going. I've been saved. I know exactly where I'm going. But he kept on saying, I want to end it. We talked a long time about this. We discussed this, the possibility of him doing it and what it would do to his family. And even though his children were alienated from him, he still wanted to do this, and he didn't think about what effect this would have on his children. He didn't care for the way his children had treated him, but he still thought about just ending it all and taking care of this pain that was coming up for him. In the end, we kept talking, we kept going back and forth, and he finally chose to allow hospice to do their job. He ended his life with no suffering, with no pain. We were able to control his pain all the way through. His children did reunite with him before he passed. And he was very thankful that he didn't end his life in that situation. The second example that I want to tell you about is that we need to have a long, serious talk with our loved ones before they get too serious in their particular disease. The earlier that you have this talk, the better. And it doesn't have to be exactly when you're diagnosed with cancer or anything else. Your family needs to know what you desire, what you want. The second scenario involves a patient with brain cancer who is unresponsive. He was unresponsive for a long period of time before he finally passed. We actually thought that he would pass a lot sooner than he did. But his family did not know what his desires were, what his wishes were in that situation. All they knew was that he didn't want to suffer. And they should have had that conversation with him long before he became unconscious. But they didn't. The family ultimately decided to make sure that he didn't suffer, which we wouldn't allow that to happen. But that family continued to come to us over and over again and said, you need to make sure families know to have a conversation, whatever disease they have, and make sure that they are on the same page. Most of us, as I said before, want to die an easy, quick death. Most of us will not have that opportunity. Most of us will end up being unconscious or unresponsive right before the time we pass. And we all need to know what the patient wants. We need to know what the family wants. It's good to have that conversation, and I will go ahead and tell you, it is very uncomfortable sometimes to tell you and your family members what you want. But we all need to know what each other wants in our situations. The next example I have here involves a gentleman that said, and I had to laugh because of the way he put it, but he says, I've got a ticket out of here. I don't care what happens to me. He was very nonchalant. He didn't really care about what other people thought. We talked a long time about assisted suicide or taking his own life. And the more we talked, the more defiant he was. He really didn't care what happened to him. He just wanted to get out of here as quick as he could. We kept talking with his family members, and we found out, and he'd never admitted this to me or to the other hospice workers, but that he was a Catholic believer. And he believed that if you committed suicide, you would go straight to hell, his words. And after we started talking to him about that, we managed to bring him back around and realize the possibilities of what he was doing was a bad thing, not only for himself and his faith, but for his family. We kept talking with his family, and his family got to the point where they just didn't want to talk to him anymore. They were worn out. They didn't appreciate his willingness to end his life, and they wanted nothing more to do with him. By talking with him, and it took several weeks for this to happen, by going back and forth and really comforting him by listening with him, we found out what his true faith was, what his true beliefs were. We were able to reconcile he and his family, and we were able to help him make the decision to transition out of this world to the next. What we try to do in hospice is to make everybody feel as comfortable as they can, to make them want to live. Hospice does not have to mean death, even though we are telling people they have 6 months or less to live. We want to give them the possibilities of a better life. We want to show them, and as chaplain, one of my jobs is to help them understand their own faith, understand what is going to happen after they leave this world. We need to, as families, talk to our loved ones and find out what they want way before it's time. It's a lot like choosing a plot in the cemetery. We need to find out where we want to be buried way before it's time to be buried. The same goes for our loved ones' lives. We need to understand and realize that we all have wants, we all have desires of what happens to us, and we need to have that conversation early on. It's my experience that if we get this information out and we understand things beforehand, it makes that transition a lot easier, a lot better for those loved ones. Do y'all have any questions or comments?
You know, Ashe County is #1 in suicide.
It is, in North Carolina.
Is.
One of the things that I've found is that people in this area, in the mountains and especially, don't have a lot of hope. And that is where the work of a chaplain comes into play. We try to show them hope. Not all the time, and most of the ones here today will confess to being Christian, of the Christian faith. But most of the time, people don't have that hope that they need in this life. And it increases the older we get. I have seen patients become believers right before they die. And it's a wonderful thing, but part of that talk that the families need to have is about our faith, is about their faith, and realizing that there is more than just this life. That is a great part of hospice. We not only treat the body, but we treat the mind, we treat the soul, we treat every part of the patient. We call it holistic care because we care for the whole person, not just a part of it. Anyone else? Thank you for your time. And if you need anything, you can always call Amorum Hospice.